When my boss looked me straight in the eye during that client presentation and said, "Keisha, honey, why don't you focus on what you do best? Go make sure the coffee station is clean for our guests." I felt something break inside me. The clients looked away. My coworkers shifted in their seats. And Brad, my colleague sitting right next to me, he just smiled. But here's what nobody in that room knew. 7 years later, that same boss who called me the cleaning lady would sit across from me in my office, resume in hand, begging for a job. And what I said to her? Well, that's the part you're going to want to stick around for. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't what you say, it's what you build. My name is Keisha Williams, and I'm about to tell you everything. The humiliation that almost destroyed me. The moment I decided enough was enough. And the day my former boss walked back into my life asking for mercy. Stay with me, because the ending is going to blow your mind. It was March 2016, and I was 29 years old, working as a marketing analyst at Dawson & Associates, a mid-sized advertising agency in Atlanta. I'd been there for 3 years. 3 years of showing up early, staying late, and creating campaigns that actually worked. I wasn't trying to be a superstar. I just wanted to do good work and be recognized for it. But in that office, no matter what I did, I was invisible. Or worse, I was visible only when they needed someone to blame. My boss was Patricia Dawson. 52 years old, perfectly styled blonde hair, designer suits, the kind of woman who made you feel small just by looking at you. She'd built that agency from the ground up 20 years ago, and she let everyone know it. Patricia had this way of smiling at you while cutting you down. Sweet as honey on the surface, poison underneath. And then there was Brad Thompson. 34, white, average at his job, but exceptional at taking credit for other people's work. Brad had been there 5 years, and somehow he was everyone's golden boy. He and Patricia had this weird alliance. She protected him. He worshipped her. And me? I was just trying to survive. That morning in March, we had a huge presentation. One of our biggest potential clients, a national restaurant chain looking to rebrand. The contract was worth $200,000. I'd spent 2 months developing the entire campaign. Market research, target demographics, creative concepts, media buying strategy, everything. I'd worked nights and weekends. I'd barely slept. This was my chance to finally show what I could do. The clients arrived at 9. 4 executives in expensive suits. Patricia greeted them like old friends, all charm and confidence. We gathered in the main conference room, the one with the glass walls so everyone in the office could see inside. I had my laptop ready, my presentation loaded, my notes organized. I was nervous, but I was ready. Patricia started the meeting. She talked about the agency's history, our previous successes, her vision for their brand. Then she said, "And now, I'd like to walk you through the campaign strategy we've developed for you." My heart jumped. This was it. My moment. But Patricia didn't look at me. She nodded at Brad. Brad stood up, grabbed the remote for the projector, and started presenting. My presentation, my research, my ideas. Word for word, slide for slide. He didn't change a single thing except he acted like he'd created it all himself. He said, "I analyzed the market, and I developed this concept, and my recommendation is..." I sat there frozen. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Patricia, waiting for her to correct him, to say something, to acknowledge that this was my work. She just smiled and nodded along like everything was perfectly normal. One of the clients, a woman probably in her 50s, asked a technical question about the demographic data. Brad stumbled. He didn't know the answer because he hadn't done the research. I had. The room got quiet. Brad looked at Patricia. Patricia looked at me. And that's when she said it. "Keisha, honey, why don't you focus on what you do best? Go make sure the coffee station is clean for our guests. We'll handle the strategy." The words hit me like a slap. The clients looked uncomfortable. One of them actually winced. My coworkers stared down at the table. And Brad, that smug smile on his face, he just shrugged like, yeah, that's appropriate. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking out of that conference room. But suddenly, I was in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror, tears running down my face. I'd worked so hard. I'd given them everything. And in front of clients, in front of the whole office through those glass walls, my boss had reduced me to the cleaning lady. I know some of you listening right now have felt this. Maybe not exactly like this, but you know what it's like to be dismissed, to be made invisible, to have your work stolen and your value questioned. And I want to know, where are you listening from right now? Are you in your car on your way to work? At home folding laundry? On a walk trying to clear your head? I love knowing where my listeners are, because your stories matter to me just like mine matters to you. And trust me, you're going to want to hear what happened next. I pulled myself together and went back to my desk. The presentation was still going on. Through the glass walls, I could see Brad still talking, Patricia still smiling, the clients still nodding. They closed the deal. $200,000. Based entirely on my work, and I got nothing. Not credit, not thanks, not even basic respect. That afternoon, Patricia called Brad into her office. Through the open door, I heard her congratulating him. Exceptional work, Brad. This is exactly the kind of initiative we reward here. 2 weeks later, Brad got promoted to senior marketing strategist. His salary jumped from $68,000 to $95,000 a year, plus a $15,000 bonus. I found out because Susan from HR left the paperwork on the printer. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. And that's when something inside me shifted. I'd been making $52,000 a year. I had 3 years of proven results. Multiple successful campaigns, client retention rates that were higher than anyone else's, and I was making $52,000 while Brad, who'd just stolen my work and gotten rewarded for it, was making $95,000. I went to HR the next day. I scheduled a meeting, brought documentation of all my projects, all my results, all the revenue I'd generated for the agency. I made my case calmly and professionally. I said I deserved recognition for the restaurant chain campaign. I said I deserved a promotion. I said I deserved fair compensation. The HR director, a tired-looking man named Kenneth, listened politely. He took notes. He said he'd look into it. 3 days later, I got called into Patricia's office. She was sitting behind her massive desk, backlit by the window so I couldn't quite see her face clearly. She gestured for me to sit down. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. Keisha, Kenneth told me about your concerns. I want you to know I hear you. But I think there's been a misunderstanding about how we work here. Marketing is collaborative. The restaurant campaign was a team effort. Brad presented it because he has the client relationship skills and the experience to handle that level of responsibility. You did good work supporting him, and that's valuable. But leadership requires more than just doing tasks. It requires presence, gravitas, the ability to command a room. Those are things that can't be taught. They're either there or they're not. She paused. Let that sink in. Then she smiled. I'm not saying you'll never get there, but right now, I think you need to focus on being the best team player you can be. Support the senior strategists. Learn from them. And maybe in a few years we can revisit this conversation. Does that make sense? What she was really saying was clear. You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. Know your place. I said, I understand. And I left her office. But I didn't understand. What I understood was that it didn't matter how hard I worked, how good my ideas were, how much revenue I generated. In Patricia's eyes, I would always be less than. I would always be support staff. I would always be the person she could dismiss with a wave of her hand. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment in East Atlanta, and I cried. I cried angry tears, hurt tears, frustrated tears. I was 29 years old, and I felt like a failure. I'd done everything right. I'd gotten my degree, I'd worked hard, I'd played by the rules, and it meant nothing. Then I called my mama. She'd worked as a nurse for 35 years, raised 3 kids mostly on her own after my daddy passed. She was the strongest woman I knew. I told her everything. The presentation, the humiliation, Brad's promotion, Patricia's dismissal. I expected her to be angry on my behalf, to tell me to fight, to go over Patricia's head, to sue, something. Instead, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Baby, let me ask you something. If you stay at that job, what's the best that can happen?" I thought about it. Maybe eventually I get promoted. Maybe in 5 years I'm making what Brad makes now. And what's the worst that can happen? I stay stuck exactly where I am. Or they fire me. And if you leave? I don't know, Mama. I don't have another job lined up. I can't afford to be unemployed. That's not what I asked. I asked what happens if you leave. What could you do? And that question, that simple question, it opened something in my mind. What could I do? For 3 years, I'd been so focused on climbing the ladder at Dawson and Associates that I'd never considered building my own ladder somewhere else. My mama continued, "You know what your problem is? You're trying to get them to see your value. But baby, you can't make blind people see. You can only go find people who already have their eyes open. Or better yet, show them something so bright they can't help but look." I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up researching. How to start a marketing agency, what you need legally, how much it costs, who the competitors are, what services are in demand. I went down a rabbit hole for hours, and the more I learned, the more possible it seemed. By morning, I had a plan. Not a perfect plan, not a complete plan, but a plan. I was going to leave Dawson and Associates. I was going to start my own marketing agency. And I was going to focus on exactly the kind of clients Patricia ignored, the small and medium-sized Black-owned businesses that needed professional marketing but couldn't afford the big agency prices. I had $8,400 in my savings account. It wasn't much, but it was something. I could survive for maybe 3 months if I was careful. But I needed a safety net. The next day, I went to see Mrs. Chen. She owned a small Chinese restaurant on Buford Highway, where I'd been eating lunch twice a week for 2 years. We'd become friendly. She'd always ask about my work, and I'd ask about her business. She'd immigrated from Taiwan in the 80s, built her restaurant from nothing. She understood what it meant to start over. I told her my plan. I told her I was leaving my job to start my own agency, that I had some savings but needed a little more cushion. I asked if she'd consider lending me $12,000. I'd pay her back with interest over 2 years. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You good worker. You respectful. You understand small business. I loan you money but no interest. You just help me with my restaurant marketing when you have time. Deal?" I almost cried right there. Deal. That $12,000 combined with my savings gave me about $20,000 to work with. Enough to survive for 6 months if I was careful. Enough to take the leap. The next Monday, I walked into Patricia's office and gave my 2 weeks' notice. She looked genuinely surprised. "Keisha, if this is about the promotion conversation, I think you're being hasty. Don't make an emotional decision you'll regret." I smiled. For the first time in 3 years, I smiled at Patricia and meant it. I'm not being emotional. I'm being strategic. I've learned everything I can here, and it's time for me to grow in a different direction. But thank you for the opportunity. I could see her trying to figure out if I had another job lined up, if I was going to a competitor, if this was some kind of power play. She asked, "Where are you going?" "I'm starting my own agency." For half a second, I saw something flash across her face. Not concern, not respect. Amusement. Like I'd just told her I was going to join the circus. "Well," she said, "I wish you the best of luck with that." She didn't mean it. What she meant was, you'll fail and come crawling back, and when you do, you'll be grateful for whatever scraps I throw you. I worked my 2 weeks. I didn't tell anyone except Susan from HR why I was really leaving. Most people assumed I'd gotten a better offer somewhere else. Brad made a joke about me finally finding my level. He said it in the break room, loud enough for everyone to hear. Guess Keisha's moving on to something more her speed, maybe event planning or HR. People laughed uncomfortably. I just smiled and kept packing my things. Patricia acted like I didn't exist. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't wish me well. On my second to last day, I passed her in the hallway, and she looked right through me like I was a ghost. I realized then that to her, I'd never been real. I'd been a tool, a resource, something to use when convenient and discard when not needed. On my last day, I packed up my desk. 3 years of work fit into 2 cardboard boxes, my college degree in the frame, a small plant my mama had given me, some pens and notebooks, a few thank you cards from clients who'd appreciated my work. That was it. 3 years reduced to 2 boxes. I said goodbye to the few co-workers who'd been kind to me. There was Marcus from accounting who always said good morning, Linda from reception who'd slip me candy when I looked stressed, a couple of junior analysts who'd asked me for advice. Good people trapped in a bad system. And I walked out of Dawson and Associates for the last time. I remember the sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor of the lobby. I remember the weight of those boxes in my arms. I remember the June heat hitting me when I pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot. I didn't feel victorious. I felt terrified. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could turn the key. What had I just done? I'd given up a steady paycheck, health insurance, stability. For what? A dream? Hope? Stubbornness? I called my mama from the parking lot. My voice was shaking. I just left. I actually did it. Mama, what if I fail? She was quiet for a moment, then she said something I'll never forget. Baby, you already failed. You failed every day you stayed in a place that made you small. Now you get to find out what happens when you try to succeed. The first month was brutal. I set up an LLC, got a business license, built a basic website. I called it KW Marketing Solutions. Not fancy, but professional. I spent $300 on a logo from a freelance designer on Fiverr. I bought business cards from Vistaprint. I set up a Google Voice number so I'd look more established than I was. I reached out to everyone I knew. Old college friends, former clients I'd worked with at the agency, people from my church, my mama's friends, my cousins, my hairstylist, my doctor, people I'd met at networking events years ago. I sent probably 200 emails that first month. Personalized messages explaining what I was doing and asking if they knew anyone who needed marketing help. Most people were polite but non-committal. That's great. Good luck. I'll keep you in mind. Let me know how it goes. A few said they'd keep me in mind. Nobody hired me. Nobody even asked for a proposal. By week 4, I was starting to panic. I'd spent nearly $2,000 on setup costs. Rent was due in 10 days. My savings account, which had started at $8,400, was down to $6,200. At this rate, I had maybe 2.5 months before I'd be completely broke. I started looking at job listings, administrative assistant positions, coordinator roles. Anything that would pay the bills. I told myself I was being practical, but really I was terrified. What if my mama was wrong? What if I'd made a huge mistake? By week 6, I was eating ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. I canceled my gym membership. I stopped getting my nails done. I drove as little as possible to save gas. Every dollar mattered. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, calculating how many days until I'd be evicted. Then I got a call from my cousin Tasha. She said her friend Janelle ran a beauty supply store in College Park and was thinking about doing some marketing but didn't know where to start. Would I talk to her? I said yes immediately. I didn't even ask what her budget was or what she needed. I just said yes. I met Janelle at her store the next day. It was small, maybe 1,200 square feet, packed floor to ceiling with products. Hair extensions, braiding hair, wigs, hair care products, makeup, beauty tools. The walls were bright pink. There was a steady stream of customers, mostly Black women coming in and out. Janelle was in her 40s, warm and direct, with long box braids and a business casual style. She invited me to her tiny office in the back, really just a desk crammed between storage shelves. She offered me water and got straight to the point. Tasha says you do marketing. I've been running this store for 8 years and I'm doing okay, but I feel like I should be doing better. I see all these businesses blowing up on Instagram and TikTok, and I don't know how to do that. I made a Facebook page 3 years ago, but I barely post. I made some flyers once on Canva, but I don't know if they worked. What can you do for me? I asked her about her goals. She said she wanted more foot traffic and to build customer loyalty. She had regulars, women who came in every 2 weeks like clockwork, but she wanted to grow beyond that. She wanted to be the go-to beauty supply store in South Atlanta, not just another option. I asked about her budget. She winced. I can maybe do $500 a month? Is that enough? $500 a month. That was nothing compared to what I'd been managing at Dawson & Associates, where our smallest retainer was $5,000. But $500 a month was $6,000 a year. It was proof someone believed in me enough to pay me. It was a start. I said, "Let me show you what I can do for $500 a month." And I pitched her a package. Social media management, 3 posts a week on Facebook and Instagram. Email marketing, building a customer list and sending monthly promotions. A VIP text club for her best customers. Local advertising, targeted Facebook ads to women within 5 miles. And consulting, monthly strategy sessions to review what was working. She listened carefully. I could see her doing math in her head, weighing the risk. $500 a month was real money to her. Then I said something I'd been thinking about. Janelle, I'm going to be honest with you. I just started my business. You'd be my first client. So I'm going to work harder for you than I would for anyone else. Because your success is my success. If this works for you, you'll tell people. And that's how I'll grow. So I'm not just selling you a service. I'm investing in a partnership. That honesty, that vulnerability, it made the difference. She smiled. Okay. Let's try it for 3 months and see what happens. We shook hands. I left that store feeling like I could fly. I had a client. I had $500 a month in recurring revenue. I had a chance. I threw everything into that account. I ran her social media like it was a national brand. I took photos of her products, styled them, wrote captions that connected with her customers. I created a VIP text club where her best customers got early access to new products and exclusive discounts. I designed a referral program that incentivized her regulars to bring in new customers. $5 off for every friend they brought who spent $25 or more. I spent hours studying her customer base. Who were they? What did they need? What problems could Janelle solve for them? I realized her customers weren't just buying hair products. They were buying confidence, beauty, self-care, transformation. So that's what I sold in the marketing. Not extensions. Transformation. Within 6 weeks, her Instagram following had grown from 200 to over 1,000. Her VIP text club had 300 members. And most importantly, her revenue was climbing. She was seeing new faces every day, people who'd found her through Facebook ads or Instagram or because a friend had referred them. By month 3, Janelle's revenue was up 22%. She called me on a Wednesday afternoon, so excited she was almost yelling. Keisha, I just looked at my numbers. I made more this month than I've ever made in 8 years. What you're doing is working. I want to increase my budget. Can we go to $800 a month and add TikTok? I wanted to cry. That was a 60% increase in my revenue from just one client. But more than that, it was validation. Proof that I knew what I was doing. Proof that small businesses could grow with the right help. Proof that I'd made the right decision leaving Dawson & Associates. And Janelle was so grateful, so appreciative of the work I was doing, that she told everyone. She told her customers. She told her friends who owned businesses. She told people at her church. She became my biggest advocate. Within 2 months, I had 3 more clients. A barbershop in Decatur, a food truck specializing in Caribbean food, and a cleaning service run by 2 sisters. All of them came through Janelle's referrals. All of them had small budgets but big dreams. The barbershop owner, a man named Troy who'd been cutting hair for 15 years, said something to me I'll never forget. He said, "I've been trying to figure out how to grow my business for years, but every agency I contacted wanted $5,000 a month minimum. I can't afford that. You're the first person who's made professional marketing accessible to someone like me." Someone like me. That phrase stuck with me, because that's who I was too. Someone who'd been locked out of opportunities because the gatekeepers had decided I wasn't enough. And now I was becoming the gatekeeper who opened the doors. By the end of my first year, I had 12 clients and was making about $47,000. It was less than I'd made at Dawson & Associates, but every dollar felt different. It was mine. I'd earned it through my work, my reputation, my integrity. Nobody was taking credit. Nobody was stealing my ideas. Nobody was making me feel small. I still lived in my tiny one-bedroom apartment. I still drove my 2008 Honda Civic with the dent in the passenger door. I still had weeks where I worried about money. But I was building something. And for the first time in my professional life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Year 2, things started to shift in a way I couldn't have predicted. One of my clients, Ms. Ruby's soul food restaurant, got featured in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The food critic wrote this glowing review about her mac and cheese and collard greens, but what caught my attention was a line near the end. Ms. Ruby's has also mastered the art of digital marketing, with a vibrant social media presence and smart community engagement strategies courtesy of KW Marketing Solutions. My business got named in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Suddenly, my phone started ringing with people I'd never met. A yoga studio in Virginia Highlands, a tutoring center in Stone Mountain, a boutique law firm specializing in family law. They'd all seen that article and wanted to know if I could help them. I realized something important then. Small businesses talk to each other. They recommend each other. They trust word of mouth more than any advertisement. And if you do good work, if you actually help people succeed, that reputation spreads faster than any marketing campaign you could run. But I had a problem. I was maxed out. I was working 18-hour days, 7 days a week, running social media for 12 different businesses, writing email campaigns, managing ad budgets, doing strategy calls, creating content, analyzing data. I was doing everything myself, and I was drowning. I sat down one night in July and did the math. If I wanted to take on more clients, I needed help. But hiring someone meant overhead, payroll taxes, workers' comp insurance, taking on more risk. What if the new clients dried up? What if I couldn't afford to pay someone? Then I remembered what my mama had said. You already failed when you stayed small. Now you get to find out what happens when you try to succeed. So I took a leap. I posted a job listing for a marketing coordinator on LinkedIn. $25,000 a year, entry level, opportunity to learn and grow. I got 63 applications in 4 days. One stood out. A young woman named Grace Chen who'd just graduated from Clark Atlanta University with a degree in marketing. Her cover letter was thoughtful and honest. She wrote that she didn't have much experience yet, but she was willing to work hard and learn from someone who understood what it meant to build something from nothing. She'd grown up in her parents' Chinese restaurant in Buford Highway, watching them work 80-hour weeks to make ends meet. She understood small business. She understood hustle. She understood the value of every dollar. I hired her. $25,000 a year felt like a massive commitment at the time. But Grace was worth every penny. She was smart, quick to learn, and she cared about our clients' success as much as I did. We worked out of my dining room table, sitting across from each other with our laptops, taking calls, creating content, strategizing. Having Grace there changed everything. Suddenly, I could take on more clients. I could focus on strategy and business development while she handled execution. I could breathe a little. By the end of year 2, we had 24 clients, and I was making $86,000, more than I'd ever made in my life. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment so Grace and I could have a proper workspace. I bought a newer used car, a 2014 Toyota Camry that didn't make strange noises when I accelerated. Small victories, but they felt huge. And I gave Grace a raise. $32,000 a year. She cried when I told her. She said no one had ever invested in her like that before. I told her that's what you do when you build something that matters. You invest in the people who help you build it. Year 3 was when we really took off. I hired 2 more people. Marcus, a graphic designer who'd been freelancing for years and wanted stability. And Jennifer, a copywriter with agency experience who was tired of the corporate grind. We moved into a small office space in Castleberry Hill. 700 square feet, 4 desks, 1 conference room, and a bathroom that barely worked. But it was ours. I'll never forget the day we moved in. It was a Saturday in March. The 4 of us carried in our desks, our computers, our supplies. We hung a sign on the door, KW Marketing Solutions. I stood outside looking at that sign and I thought about Patricia, about Brad, about everyone who'd made me feel like I wasn't enough. And I thought, look at me now. We started landing bigger clients. Not Fortune 500 companies, but established businesses with real budgets. A chain of 8 hair salons that wanted to rebrand. A catering company doing corporate events with a $12,000 annual contract. A medical practice with 3 locations that needed help with patient acquisition. I raised my rates too. I had to. We couldn't keep charging $500 a month for the level of work we were doing. Our smallest package went to $1,200 a month. Some clients left when I raised prices, but most stayed because they were seeing results. And the clients who left got replaced by better clients who valued quality. I also started getting invited to speak at events, small business conferences, Chamber of Commerce meetings, women's entrepreneurship workshops. I'd tell my story about leaving the agency, starting with nothing, building something meaningful. People connected with it. They saw themselves in me. And after every speaking engagement, I'd get 3 or 4 leads from people who wanted to work with us. By the end of year 3, we had 38 clients, and I was personally making $140,000. But more importantly, the business itself was worth something. We had systems in place, documented processes, recurring revenue, a strong brand, happy clients. We weren't just a business anymore. We were an asset. Year 4 was about professionalization. I hired a business coach who'd built and sold 2 marketing agencies. He taught me about scaling, about building systems that didn't depend entirely on me, about creating real value in a business beyond just revenue. I learned how investors evaluate agencies and what makes a business worth buying. I brought on specialists instead of generalists. A social media manager who lived and breathed Instagram and TikTok. A client success coordinator whose only job was keeping our existing clients happy. A data analyst who could make sense of all the metrics we were tracking. Each hire made us better, more efficient, more valuable. And here's what happened when we got picky. When we only took clients we knew we could help, our results got even better. Our client retention rate hit 94%. People stayed with us year after year because we made them money. We weren't just a vendor. We were a partner in their success. And happy clients refer other clients. Our new business became almost entirely referral-based. By year 5, we had 56 clients. Our annual revenue hit $1.2 million. My personal income was $210,000. I'd paid off my student loans, all $38,000 of them. I'd bought a house, a small 3-bedroom Craftsman in Grant Park. Nothing extravagant but mine. I had a backyard, a porch, a place that was truly home. And I did something that meant more to me than any of the financial success. I hired my mama to do part-time bookkeeping for me. 15 hours a week at $25 an hour. It wasn't much, but it meant she could finally cut back her hours at the hospital. She'd been a nurse for 35 years, working 12-hour shifts, sacrificing her body and her time to take care of other people. Now I could take care of her, at least a little bit. The day she came into the office for her first shift, I watched her sit at her desk, learning our accounting software, and I had to leave the room because I started crying. Grace found me in the conference room wiping my eyes. She didn't say anything, just hugged me. She understood. This was bigger than business. This was redemption. This was proving that betting on yourself pays off, not just for you, but for everyone you love. But I wasn't satisfied yet. I wanted more. Not for ego, not to prove anything to anyone anymore, but because I could see the need. There were so many Black-owned businesses in Atlanta, businesses with real potential, incredible products and services that couldn't get quality marketing help. Big agencies didn't want them because their budgets were too small. Cheap agencies did poor work that wasted their money. We were filling a real gap in the market, and that gap was enormous. Year 6, I made the biggest and scariest decision of my business career. I went to a bank, sat across from a loan officer, and asked for a $150,000 business loan. I had a solid business plan, 3 years of profitable financials, a growing client base. The loan officer approved it, $150,000 at 6.5% interest. I used that money to hire senior talent. People with big agency experience, people who'd worked at places like Ogilvy and Whedon plus Kennedy, who believed in our mission enough to take a chance on a smaller agency. I hired a creative director who'd won awards. I hired a strategist who'd worked with Fortune 500 brands. I invested in better technology, better project management systems, better training for our team, and I took some calculated risks on larger clients. Companies I would have been terrified to pitch to 3 years earlier. We went after a regional healthcare system, a local university, a tech startup that had just raised Series A funding. We didn't win them all, but we won enough. By the end of year 6, we had 72 clients, 12 full-time employees, and revenue of $2.8 million. We'd moved into a bigger space in Midtown, 2,000 square feet, with a real conference room, a kitchen, an open workspace that felt alive and creative. We had a company culture. We had team lunches. We celebrated birthdays. We gave back to the community, offering free marketing workshops to small business owners who couldn't afford our services. And I commissioned a business valuation. I wanted to know what we'd built. An accounting firm that specialized in agencies spent 2 weeks analyzing our financials, our client contracts, our recurring revenue, our brand value, everything. They came back with a number that made me read the report 3 times. $5.3 million. The business I'd started 7 years earlier with $8,400 in my savings account was now worth $5.3 million. I sat in my office alone when I read that number, and I cried. Not sad tears, grateful tears, overwhelmed tears. Tears of someone who'd been told she wasn't enough and had somehow, against all odds, built something extraordinary. Year 7 started strong. We were on pace to hit $4 million in revenue. We'd added 3 more team members, bringing us to 15 employees. Grace, my first hire, who'd started at $25,000 a year, was now my director of strategy, making $82,000. She had an office, a team reporting to her, real authority and responsibility. Watching her grow had been one of my proudest achievements. But here's the thing. The money was amazing, don't get me wrong. But what really mattered was what I'd built. I'd created jobs. Real jobs with good salaries and benefits. Grace, my first employee, was now my director of strategy, making $82,000 a year. I'd helped hundreds of businesses grow. I'd proven that you could be successful and ethical, that you could make money and make a difference. And I did it all without Patricia Dawson's approval. I thought about her sometimes. I wondered if she knew I existed, if she'd heard about my agency, if she ever thought about the analyst she'd dismissed as the cleaning lady. But mostly I didn't think about her at all. I was too busy building. Then came year 7. October, to be exact. Now here's where the story gets interesting. Here's the part I've been building up to. Because everything I just told you All that growth and success and hard work, that was just the setup. The real story is what happened when Patricia Dawson walked back into my life. And before I tell you that part, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone who hurt you came back needing your help? Have you ever had to decide between revenge and grace? Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one, and your experiences help other people feel less alone. It was a Tuesday morning in October. I was in my office going over quarterly projections with Grace when my assistant knocked on the door. Her name was Ashley, 25 years old, usually unflappable. But she looked uncomfortable. "Keisha, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "A Patricia Dawson?" My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought I'd heard wrong. "Patricia Dawson? From Dawson and Associates?" Ashley nodded. "She says she knows you. Should I tell her you're not available?" I could have said yes. I could have had Ashley send her away. Part of me wanted to, but a bigger part of me was curious. What could Patricia possibly want from me? "Give me 5 minutes, then show her in." Ashley left. Grace looked at me with raised eyebrows. I'd told her the story, years ago, about why I'd left my old agency. She knew who Patricia was. "You okay?" Grace asked. "I don't know yet." Those 5 minutes felt like an hour. My mind was racing. Why was she here? What did she want? Was this some kind of power play? Was she going to try to poach my clients? Offer to buy my agency? Mock me? Then Ashley opened the door and Patricia Dawson walked in. I almost didn't recognize her. 7 years had not been kind. She'd aged more than 7 years should account for. Her face looked drawn, tired. Her clothes were still expensive, but not quite as sharp as I remembered. She looked like a woman under pressure. "Keisha," she said. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Patricia, this is unexpected." She sat down, and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "I'm sure it is. I'll get straight to the point. I'm here because I need your help. Or rather, I'm here to see if you're hiring." For a moment, I didn't understand what she was saying. Then it clicked. "You're looking for a job?" "Yes." She said it quietly, almost embarrassed. "I know this is awkward given our history. But I've heard about your agency. Everyone in Atlanta has. You've built something remarkable. And I'd like to be part of it." I sat back in my chair. This was surreal. Patricia Dawson, the woman who'd humiliated me, who'd stolen my work, who'd told me I didn't have the gravitas for leadership, was sitting in my office asking for a job. "What happened to Dawson and Associates?" I asked. Patricia's face tightened. "It's gone. We closed last month. It's been struggling for years. We lost clients to digital agencies, to younger competitors with fresh ideas. I tried to adapt, but I was stuck in old ways of thinking. By the time I realized how far behind we'd fallen, it was too late. I had to declare bankruptcy." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And surprisingly, part of me meant it. "Brad's gone too," she continued, and there was bitterness in her voice. "He left 3 years ago for a bigger agency. They fired him after 18 months for performance issues. Last I heard, he's selling insurance." There was a long silence. Patricia looked around my office, at the awards on the wall, at the photos of our team, at the vision board with our revenue goals. "You did it," she said quietly. "You built everything I thought I was building, but better, with integrity, with purpose. I was wrong about you, Keisha. I was wrong about a lot of things." I could have gloated. I could have thrown her words back at her. I could have reminded her of every humiliation, every dismissal, every time she'd made me feel small. But sitting there, looking at this woman who'd once had all the power and now had none, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not anger, just clarity about who I was and who I'd become. "Patricia," I said, "I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate the honesty. But I'm not going to hire you. Her face fell. I understand. I don't deserve your consideration after how I treated you. But I'm a good strategist. I have 25 years of experience. I could contribute. I'm sure you could, I said. But that's not why I'm saying no. I'm saying no because my agency isn't built on experience alone. It's built on values, respect, equity, believing in people's potential instead of limiting it. And I don't think you've learned those lessons yet. I think you're here because you're desperate, not because you've changed. Patricia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She knew I was right. I continued. 7 years ago, you told me I didn't have the presence or gravitas for leadership. You told me to focus on being a good team player. You looked at me and saw someone who would never be more than support staff. Do you remember that? Yes, she whispered. I remember. Here's what you didn't see. You didn't see that I was already a leader. I just needed to lead somewhere I was valued. You didn't see my potential because you'd already decided what I was worth based on what I looked like, how old I was, the color of my skin. You saw limitations that didn't exist. You're right, Patricia said. I was biased. I was threatened. You were good at your job, maybe better than Brad, and I couldn't acknowledge that because it didn't fit my view of how things should be. I'm ashamed of that. I appreciate you saying that. But shame doesn't change anything. And giving you a job at my company wouldn't change anything either. It would just be another version of me trying to prove my worth to you. And I don't need to do that anymore. I already know my worth. Patricia stood up slowly. She looked defeated, but also, in a strange way, relieved. Like she'd been carrying something heavy and finally got to put it down. I understand, she said. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've built. You deserved better than what I gave you. I see that now. She walked to the door, then paused. Keisha, can I ask you something? Do you hate me? I thought about it. Did I? 7 years ago, absolutely. 5 years ago, probably. But now? No, I said honestly. I don't hate you. I used to, but hate takes energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. What you did hurt me, and it was wrong. But it also pushed me to build something I might never have built otherwise. So in a weird way, I should thank you. You showed me exactly who I didn't want to be. Patricia nodded slowly. That's more grace than I deserve. Maybe. But it's the grace I'm choosing to give. Not for you. For me. She left. I sat in my office alone for a long time, processing what had just happened. Grace knocked eventually, poked her head in. You good? She asked. Yeah, I said. I'm good. I'm really good, actually. And I was. Because that moment, that conversation, it confirmed something I'd been building toward for 7 years. I wasn't the person Patricia had tried to make me. I wasn't small. I wasn't limited. I wasn't just the cleaning lady. I was Keisha Williams, CEO of a $5.3 million marketing agency, employer of 15 people, mentor to young professionals, proof that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest gift you can receive. That was several months ago. Patricia reached out once more, via email, asking if I knew of any agencies that might be hiring. I forwarded her information to a few contacts. I heard she eventually found a position as a consultant at a small firm. She's doing okay from what I understand. Not thriving, but surviving. And honestly, I hope she finds her way. As for me, we're on track to hit $4 million in revenue this year. We're expanding into new markets. We're hiring 3 more people next month. We just signed our biggest client ever, a national retail chain that found us because of our reputation for authentic, effective marketing to Black consumers. And sometimes, when I'm in a strategy meeting or reviewing a campaign or mentoring one of my team members, I think about that day in Patricia's conference room. When she told me to go clean the coffee station, when I felt invisible and worthless and small. I think about it, and I smile, because that moment didn't define me. What I built after that moment defined me. So here's what I want you to take from my story. If you're in a job where you're not valued, where your work is stolen, where you're made to feel less than, listen carefully. That is not a reflection of your worth. That is a reflection of their limitations. And you have a choice. You can stay and keep hoping they'll finally see you. Or you can leave and build something where your value is obvious. It won't be easy. I had plenty of moments where I thought I'd made a terrible mistake, plenty of nights crying over bills I couldn't pay, plenty of times I questioned whether I had what it took. But here's the truth. You have more power than you think. You have more potential than anyone has told you. And sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being pushed out of a place that was never meant to hold you. Patricia Dawson thought she was putting me in my place. What she actually did was push me into my purpose. And if you're listening to this story because you're in your own version of that conference room, feeling small and dismissed and invisible, I want you to know something. You are not the cleaning lady. You are not support staff. You are not less than. You are a leader waiting for the right place to lead. And when you find that place, or build that place, you will look back on this moment and realize it wasn't a setback. It was a setup. 7 years ago, I walked out of an office with $8,400 and a dream. Today, I run a multi-million-dollar company. Not because I was lucky, not because it was easy, but because I refused to let someone else's limited vision limit my life. So thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here with me. And if this resonated with you, if you've been that person who was underestimated and overlooked, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Because I'm going to keep sharing stories like this. Stories of women who were told they weren't enough and decided to prove that they were more than enough. Stories of resilience and strength and refusing to accept other people's limitations. Your story matters. Your potential matters. And no matter where you are right now, no matter how stuck or small or invisible you feel, remember this. The person who underestimates you today might be asking for your help tomorrow. And when that day comes, I hope you have the clarity to see that you don't need their validation. You never did. This is Keisha Williams, and this is my story. Not of revenge, of becoming.